Quiet on the set, please.
Camera speed.
Sound production, take one.
And action!
Welcome to From Beneath the Hollywood Sign. If you love old movies, Hollywood history, or the golden age of filmmaking, you've come to the right place. This is the podcast that talks about amazing stories of Tinseltown from another era. Hear fascinating conversations with writer-producer Steve Cubine, who quite literally lives just beneath the Hollywood sign, and actress-writer Nan McNamara. Now your hosts, Steve and Nan.
Welcome, everybody. We have a very special episode for you today on From Beneath the Hollywood Sign, and we have a really special guest, and I'm so excited about having him today. So, Nan, want to tell us about our guest?
I'm going to tell you about him. I'm thrilled that he's here. It's Peter Ford. Peter is the son of ELEANOR Powell, one of MGM's greatest musical stars, and Glenn Ford, Hollywood's #1 box office star of 1958 and the star of so many films that we're going to get to talk about
and
today.
One of our favorite actors, we have to say.
Yes. Now, Peter was born in Los Angeles, California. Peter's childhood, which is so fascinating, included being taught to swim by Johnny Weissmuller, honing golf skills under the tutelage of the legendary Ben Hogan. And this is one I love because I'm a martini gal. Having his first martini made for him by Fritz Lang when he was 10.
I love that. You know, Peter received an Associate of Arts degree from Santa Monica College while pursuing a career as an actor and singer. Now, under contract to Capitol Records, Peter was mentored by the incomparable Nat King Cole, and the release of his single Blue Ribbons resulted in appearances on many of the teen music television shows of the era, including American Bandstand, Hullabaloo, and Ninth Street West. He eventually formed his own group, The Creations, which appeared in various local clubs, as well as the Whiskey A Go-Go in San Francisco and the El Cortez Club in Las Vegas.
Peter has also worked as an actor and dialogue coach on nearly 24 film projects, many of which were with his father, Glenn Ford. Peter attended USC, where he met his future wife, Linda Gunderson. Peter graduated cum laude with a BA degree in English. Peter, you are a Renaissance man. Your life also includes joining the photo unit of the LA County Sheriff's Department as a reserve deputy, retiring as a lieutenant after 22 years. And also, you are a licensed contractor, owning your own company, building custom residential homes for many clients, and Peter's work was featured in architectural magazines throughout the world.
Now, Peter and Linda celebrate 55 years of marriage, which is amazing.
Yes.
As I said earlier, you should get a trophy for that, Peter.
Congrats.
And they have 3 children, Aubrey, Ryan, and Eleanor. Peter maintains the Glenn Ford and Eleanor Powell Library and Archives. He's written numerous articles and is the author of an amazing book, actually. Nan and I both just finished it, Glenn Ford, A Life, which is a definitive biography of his father, which was published by the University of Wisconsin Press in 2011. Peter is joining us via Zoom. So welcome, Peter.
Welcome, Peter.
Oh, I'm glad to be here.
Well, we're so glad you're here. Let's just dive in. We have so many things to chat about. Your childhood, as we alluded to in your introduction, sounds like it's a pretty remarkable one. Can you describe growing up surrounded by Hollywood and the film industry from your perspective as a child of 2 legendary stars?
Well, I can. Of course, I didn't know they were stars. To me, it was just mom and dad. But the problem for me was that, not really a problem, but the situation was that we lived in kind of a remote part of Beverly Hills in those days. It was 1012 Cove Way. The house is still there. Actually, the address has changed. I think it's 1036 now, if somebody wanted to drive over there.
Wow. Okay, that's very
the house
interesting.
is exactly as it was when I lived there. But there was not a lot of children around. To answer the question, I didn't really have a lot of friends. When I went to school, I had friends, but it wasn't like next door neighbors where I could go and play. So I lived kind of a loner existence, really. And it was interesting being the child of 2 very, very prominent stars because I was required to do a lot of interviews. And so it was like every weekend. In those days, they used to have what they called movie magazines. They don't have them anymore, I don't think. But, People magazine, I guess today would be equivalent. But then there's some of those tabloids. But, Photoplay and Modern Screen and all the different magazines. And every weekend, my job was to be the son, and they would do photo layouts. It's amazing though that I'm up here in the state of Montana right now, and I probably have, I don't know, 10,000 photographs of myself and my family. I need to put them together in some chronological order, but I have a picture of me almost every day of my life. And so in that way, it's amazing. It's something that I don't know if it's good or bad, but it is what it is.
Yeah.
It sounds like growing up that your house was just chock full of really fascinating people who were part of your parents' orbits. Care to talk about your neighbors or maybe some of the people that would come over as you were a kid?
Well, at the time I was born, my mom had retired, and so was my dad, really. But my mom had a lot of friends. I remember a lot of her people from the vaudeville days would come by, like Eddie Cantor and Jack Benny, and oh gosh, I remember Benny Goodman coming over, and
Oh, wow.
and a lot of people like Tommy Dorsey, those kinds of people. And between my dad, working with Barbara Stanwyck and all of these different people, there was coming and going all the time of people you would know in the movie business.
Right.
Yeah.
Early on, my parents, they would get autograph requests and they would mail pictures out. So when these people came to the house, I thought, well, that was just something to do. So the first autograph I got was from Pola Negri.
Oh, wow. That's amazing.
Long in the truth to even know who that is.
Oh, that's amazing.
But
That
started
day.
amassing this incredible collection of my family friends of all of these people. And so it's kind of fun to look back. And sadly, now they're all past.
Yeah.
But it was really interesting to meet those folks in those days.
One thing I just wanted to bring up, Peter, and I love this because I read it in an article about you, that your first crush was Gloria May, who I knew Gloria quite well because her mother, Ann Rutherford, is the very reason I am in Hollywood, believe it or not. Yes.
Wow.
I
Yes.
loved Gloria, God rest her soul. Yes.
No, that's true. I didn't really put her together with Anne. Yeah, Anne Rutherford, what a sweet lady. Oh gosh, I tell you, some of those people, Steve, some of them were just so wonderful. Jimmy Stewart and the people that you see on screen that you would identify with and have empathy with, they're very much like they were in real life, and it was really just a great pleasure to grow up knowing all those people.
That's amazing. And I heard James Mason was a babysitter at one point.
Yes, yeah. When my mom went on tour when I was 2, my dad was working, and we lived in a huge mansion in Beverly Hills in those days. But when my father needed to be out of the house and the people who worked for us weren't there, I would be taken down to Mr. Mason's house, and James Mason was my babysitter. And conversely, my dad would babysit Portland, James's daughter, sometimes. So I think she's passed as well. So no, he was my babysitter. Absolutely. And the worst part was that he had lots of cats. He was a cat person. And we had this dog, which we might talk about later because of his demise at the hands of Charlie Chaplin, which you know about. My dog Bill used to chase down James Mason's cats. We'd find these dead cats on our lawn in the morning.
Oh, no.
It was terrible. And so my dad and Mason, they had some issues beyond just me being the babysat.
Oh my gosh.
I could imagine.
Since you brought up Charlie, two other neighbors that we would love to chat about, Mary Pickford. We'd love to hear about that. And let's talk about Charlie Chaplin, because he was a neighbor of yours.
When my mom first came out here in the mid-1930s to work at MGM, she leased a house down on Bedford Drive in Beverly Hills, and Mary Pickford owned that house. And that's how my mom got to know Mary Pickford, because she was renting from Mary Pickford's house.
Wow.
727 North Bedford Drive. And that house is still there too. So mom knew her. And when my mom married my dad, my mom would go visit Pickford, and I would go up, and I have a picture of me somewhere sitting on Mary Pickford's lap.
Wow.
And of course, Charlie Chaplin lived next door, and Fred Astaire lived up the street. And there was just a lot of interesting people in our neighborhood.
When did you know your parents were famous?
I guess probably when I was, maybe 8 or 9 years old, 10 years old. I think I started putting two to two together. I started realizing, not everybody has Jimmy Stewart over for dinner, So I started thinking, well, these people, I see them in the movies, in the early days, you'd see some old movies on television. And I'd say to myself, God, this is very interesting. But it did occur to me eventually.
Yes. And did you see as a young child your parents' films, or would it depend upon the subject matter?
I did not see that many. I know my dad took me to a few premieres or screenings of his films when I was young. But I tell you the truth, I was just busy with school, and we'd see a lot of stuff on television. My dad had some films that would come on TV, but that was in the late 50s.
Now, speaking of your dad, did he ever share stories about life on the set or people he worked with or working on some of his great films, Gilda, The Big Heat?
Yeah, no, he made a lot of great films. He didn't share them necessarily with me at the time, although he kept a diary. And
Right.
I have all of his diaries. Believe me, when I wrote that book initially, the one you just mentioned, Glenn Ford of Life, it was 3 times as long. The editor said, we're not doing the great book series or anything. So I had to edit and edit and edit and edit. And finally, I got it down to what it is today. But those diaries are just full of wonderful information. I tried to incorporate some of it into the book. They just wouldn't allow me to have the space. But I tell you, and my mother kept diaries too. I got diaries from my mother when she was in the 20s, when she was on Broadway as a teenager. And it's just a wealth of information. But it's just,
Oh, wow.
But I do know all the stories.
Well, I have to say, the way that hearing how long it originally was, it's so beautifully written. It's so personally written and well written. I'd love to chat just for a minute about your mom, one of the greatest, probably the greatest tap dancer of all time.
Without a doubt.
We know that when she started a family and had you, that she retired. But we wondered, what was it like having her as your mother in terms of, did she continue to dance at home? What was she like off stage?
By the time I was born and I became cognizant of things, she was, I would be 2 or 3 years old and she was not dancing at that time.
Okay.
Yeah.
But she didn't dance in the house. She had a tremendous record collection. That's why all of those people would come to the house and visit her from her days back when she was at MGM. But she was just the most wonderful person as a human being. I was just so blessed. We're not going to get into too much into the weeds on this show, on this issue, but my dad was really an absentee father. And there's reasons why. I mean, it's kind of a complicated deal, but I think I was born too soon into their marriage. I mean, I know the day I was conceived, put it that way. My parents, or let me just say this, you can get the idea from this. My parents married October 23rd, 1943. I was conceived on my father's birthday, May 1st, 1944.
Okay.
And I was born February 1945. So they were together from October to his birthday, and he was in the Marines at that time. So he was serving down in Camp Pendleton, and my mother would, when she could, she'd come down. They'd lease a house in La Jolla so they could be together. And then she's pregnant. And so, then she's concentrating on the baby, me. And there really wasn't a lot of time for them to, experience marriage together as a man and wife.
Right.
And I think when I was born, it was like, great, here he is. And again, Steve and I talked about this before this airing, and I can't feel sorry for myself. I mean, I traveled the world. I met emperors, I met presidents, I met kings. I rode in a parade in Belgium with the King of Belgium from Antwerp to Brussels. I mean, I met Emperor Hirohito when we were in Japan.
You skipped the strippers, though.
Yeah, no, I did have my share of strippers too. That I did mention that too.
You're cleaning it up for our show.
Yeah. My dad, he was not the best husband, let's put it that way. Linda and I have been married. She is my very best friend. We've never had a fight, never had an argument. I mean, I am triple blessed with my wife, but my dad, he had a wandering eye.
Yeah.
And not only did his eye wander, but other parts of his body did too.
I think that's well documented.
Yes,
Oh, yeah.
yes.
It was kind of sad in a way. Again, it was what it was. And I sometimes tell my wife, when we talked about this, I feel like I was sent from central casting to play the role of a son. Now with my mom, that wasn't the case. She adored me. And in fact, she loved me so much to the exclusion of my father that kicked in and some.
Well, that was my question. Do you think that maybe some of the problems with your dad resulted from maybe him being jealous of your relationship with your mom?
Absolutely. That's exactly what happened. And I didn't know. I was just this little unwitting thing. I love my mom, but the more my mom doted on me, the more my father, did my father have a wandering eye and want to, wander off the plantation anyway? I don't know. And this was an excuse, but, I documented about 130 different relationships. And I don't mean necessarily sexual, but, more than just a hug
Right.
with my dad. I mean, you wouldn't believe the who's who of this list.
Well, you know, it's as I was
I
reading.
didn't want to get into that in the book because I don't want to demean anybody, and sully them. But I tell you, he had some flings with some very interesting people.
Well, I have to say, Peter, as I read your book, and that sort of became the ongoing theme with who Glenn is sleeping with, I made a list.
Oh my God.
Okay, it is the who's who of the most exquisite, beautiful, most talented women you can imagine.
He was a great, great actor, truly, and never got recognition. I mean, when you think about it, again, he did drama, he did classic westerns, he did western comedies, he did regular comedies, he did, Christmas movies, war epics, submarine movies, film noirs. He was just so talented and never got nominated for an Academy Award.
Which is criminal.
Not even a nomination. I don't know.
That is criminal that he was never nominated.
To me, it is.
Yeah. Peter, it's interesting just talking about these relationships. It reminds me in your book, you talk about how your father started and that so many people kept telling him he's not handsome enough for the movies. Right. He's not handsome enough. And I'm thinking,
really?
Who are you?
Yeah.
Like, look at this man. He's a gorgeous person. He's a gorgeous, good looking guy. So it's interesting that, perhaps that just evolved with his screen presence. But it's ironic that he had so many relationships, and at the beginning of his career, people were saying, no, he can't do film.
I understand. I agree with you. He was lucky. I mean, he got a good start with he started at 20th Century Fox with that first film in 1939, Heaven with a Barbed Wire Fence, which was kind of a forgettable one. But then as soon as he signed with Columbia, the first films were kind of not great, but he did one film called So Ends Our Night with Frederick March. It was really a great film, and that was a film that kind of kicked his career up.
Well, speaking of the work your parents did, were they critical of their own work? Did they ever talk about maybe roles that they wish they had done or roles they wish they hadn't done, or what was their take on their careers?
Well, it would have, again, my mom, she was long ago retired, but my dad, I mean, he hated that Loves of Carmen that he made with Rita.
I read that. You said that. Yeah. Why did he hate that movie so much?
I know it was a costume film, and Rita was domineering, and he was kind of, shown to be, Don Juan, kind of to his Carmen, and then another one my mom insisted that he do called The Man from Colorado.
With Ellen Drew and
he didn't like that one either. I didn't put this in the book, Stephen, but he, I maybe I shouldn't even go there, but well,
go there.
Okay, but he got Rita pregnant up in Lone Pine, California, making Loves of Carmen. She became pregnant.
Oh wow!
And I could have not have been an only child, but that did not set well with my mother. You can imagine.
Was that the beginning of the end, or was that the end?
Well, that was the start of the end. But she tolerated his infidelities, and finally, she was afraid. I mean, this kind of get into psychological weeds here, but she was afraid that if she left the marriage before I was at the age of 14, because at the age of 14, you can make the choice, at least in California at that time, of what parent you want to go with. My father was the breadwinner. My mother had no money. I mean, she had nothing. My dad gave her like a little allowance. She didn't need anything. I mean, because I think I told you we had like 6 in help, and we lived in a 6-bedroom mansion. I mean, I had my own nurse when I was little and all that. It was an interesting life growing up. It was good, and there was some trouble too.
Yeah.
Now, why did you choose to not tell that story in the book? I'm just curious.
I didn't want to get into this. It was just too salacious.
Yeah.
And Rita's daughter Yasmin is still around, and I just didn't think I needed to go there.
Yeah.
I could have made a really interesting book of what, as you know, Stephen, from what some things I've said to you. But he was an interesting guy. But it caused quite a rift in my mom. And finally, by the time I was 14, she divorced him on his birthday.
Oh, wow. Happy birthday.
Happy birthday, Glenn. She divorced him on his birthday. I turned 14 and on February 5th, 1959, and she served him divorce papers on his birthday. So you can imagine that's kind of like sticking the knife into the wound, shall we say.
Yeah, exactly. Peter, how did Glenn and Eleanor, being the amazing stars in their time, how did they handle the fame? Nowadays it's so present on social media.
Social media, yeah.
How, from your perspective, did they enjoy it? Was it difficult for them?
Were they comfortable in the spotlight?
Yeah.
I don't know the answer to that, Dan. I don't know. I don't know because it was not a part of anything. I was in the house, the little kid, the son. They
Sure.
never talked about that. But in those days they had some fixers at MGM certainly, and you never got the sensational stuff you have today because it was all
Right.
hushed up. If
Yes.
anything, if anybody got into trouble, it was Howard Strickling maybe that he was the PR
Oh,
guy at
they
MGM,
had
and
those.
he was
They
a
had.
fixer, and he'd go and talk to the police chief of Beverly Hills and say we're not going to talk about this. So it was a very different world in those days. Today is everything's in the open up today, so
There's a
it's
great
not
book.
like that.
There's a great book called The Fixers, and it's all about those guys that their whole job was just to cleaning up the mess of the stars.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
today the mess makes you famous, so it's a different world.
I know. Look at those Kardashians.
Right.
Yeah, I know.
Well, before we talk some more about your mom and dad, Glenn Ford and Eleanor Powell, Steve, let's give our listeners this week's Hollywood Pop Quiz.
And this is a great pop quiz question this week, and it involves our special guest, Peter Ford. And the question is, who were Peter Ford's godparents? And this is a good one, folks.
Well, I know the answer, so Peter, I bet you do too.
I think I do. Yep.
We'll be right back with that and more with Peter Ford after this.
Steve and Ann will be right back, but first another stop on the Hollywood tour. Peter Ford mentioned his beloved childhood dog, Bill. Bill was a German shepherd who loved to roam the celebrity-filled neighborhood in Beverly Hills where the Ford family lived. Well, one rainy evening, Bill got out of the yard of the Ford's home. Apparently he was pretty good at escaping. And somehow he got tangled up in the wheels of nearby neighbor Charlie Chaplin's car. Sadly, Bill didn't survive it, and understandably, young Peter was frantic with grief over the loss of his canine buddy. As Peter wrote in his book, Glenn Ford, A Life, quote, "Chaplin may have made millions laugh in his day, but at that moment I despised him," unquote. Little tramp indeed. And now back to Steve and Ann and their guest, Peter Ford, from Beneath the Hollywood Sign.
Welcome back, everybody. We have a really great guest with us today, Peter Ford, and we were in the middle of talking about his parents, Glenn Ford and Eleanor Powell, and we're going to continue the conversation with a question I had for you, Peter, was after your parents divorced, your mom really devoted her life to her Christian faith. Did she ever find love again, though?
No, I don't think so. She did have one kind of a beau she met. His name was Freddie, but they never married. But no, she never did find love. No, actually, my father didn't either, although he was married a few times. And that was something he was looking for, some kind of a relationship. But you got to be monogamous, You can't be a player and expect to have a good relationship. So.
Yeah. And I also wanted to ask you this, Peter. Did you attend church with your mom? Because didn't she go to the First Presbyterian Church in Beverly Hills?
Yes, right. I went to that church. That was the church and she taught there later.
Oh, that's what I thought. Well, a little tidbit, and I didn't share this with you yet, but my nephew, Andrew Eagles, is the current senior pastor there at that church.
Really? Isn't that interesting?
Isn't that a small world?
We've both been there many, many times.
Yeah, it's like
to see him preach.
gorgeous church. Yeah.
Yeah.
And when I used to go, Jimmy Stewart used to go there to that church.
Yes.
Well, they call that church the church that Jimmy Stewart built.
Right. Well, it probably did. And I remember talking to him often there at the church, and we talk about my mom and talk about working together. And he was a great guy.
And Margaret Hamilton started the preschool there.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, lots of Hollywood connections to that great church.
Amazing.
Yeah, interesting. And then, from that, my mom did that. Faith of Our Children was a TV show that she did. And it won five local Emmys for that.
That's right.
And that was from, I think, 53 to 56. I'm not sure. But we would go to the NBC studios in Hollywood and record that. And she would have, I don't know, celebrity guests on. But it was a very, very popular show at the time in Los Angeles.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
We've touched on Rita Hayworth a little bit, but we would be remiss if we didn't ask. You used to call her Aunt Rita, if I'm not mistaken. What was she like? What do you remember about her?
Well, I mean, she was just a very sweet, kind of a naive, really, person. When we got married, after we married in my dad's house, as I think I said to you, the next week we had a reception, and Rita came to that reception. Linda got a chance to meet her as well.
Wow.
And then they lived next door to each other until she actually moved out, and she left. But they were, my dad and Rita were next door neighbors. But Rita was just a very sweet, very unassuming person, and just not at all this the sexy person that you think of her to be.
That's so interesting. When it's funny because she and your dad, I mean, they were friends, they were lovers, they had a really complicated relationship that lasted for decades. What do you think that strong bond was between them?
I don't know. They actually met when my father was a young teen. Rita, there were some gambling ships off the coast of Los Angeles in those days, and they would have entertainment on that. And so my grandfather, my father's father, I don't want to get too much into this, but he ran a tram that ran between the Venice and Santa Monica Pier. And so my dad sometimes would fill in as a tram driver, and that's where we first met Rita, on that tram, being taken to go out to the gambling ships to do some entertaining. That was, her name was, Margaret Casino in those days, or Margarita Casino. So they started off really, really young together, and he was a pallbearer at her funeral. So it was a long, long relationship.
Oh, wow. That's wonderful.
Wow.
I want to shift gears a little bit to talk about you and your career, because you also enjoyed some time in front of the camera. What was it like for you as an actor coming from this Hollywood pedigree? Do you think there were greater expectations placed on you because of who your parents were?
Oh, I would assume so. Although, I tell you the truth, Stephen, I starred in a low budget film, but most of the stuff I did were just 1 week, 1 day, just bit parts. For me, it was a passion. I tell you, the singing was something that I really embraced more than the acting. But I could never make enough money to survive as an actor. That's how I got into building contracting work, because my poor wife, she's working as a school teacher in the Torrance school system, teaching third grade. And here I am working 1 day a week. And I'm saying, goodbye, honey, off to work. And she's working like a dog. And here I am sitting on the house. So I had to reinvent myself. And that's why because I was always handy with tools. And that's how I became a building contractor, and why I became a building contractor, so I could be a good husband and a provider.
Smart man.
Yeah. Well, you were also, Peter, on your dad's television show, Cades County. So working directly with him regularly, how was that? And did you see him in a different light because of that experience?
Yeah, I was the dialogue director as well. And so because I was on the set all the time, they finally decided to make me, I'm there anyway. They're paying me to be there. So they had me become one of the deputies. I don't know. I mean, it was just, my dad was kind of like a buddy to me. By that time, there was no father-son looking up to him like some kind of a hero. He was just my father, but it's hard to explain, Nan. It's just, he was just a regular guy. And again, we didn't have the best time growing up. He didn't treat me the way I thought he should. But on the other hand, I was so lucky to be raised and meet all the people I met. And he meant such a lot to so many other people. For me to be peevish and feel sorry for myself and wallow in self-pity, it just didn't make any sense. But to answer your question, he and I never really talked about acting, although he did give me some pointers now and then. But he was pretty tough on me, though. And he was requiring, and that's okay. I remember one time he was coming into a scene, and I was the deputy at the desk, and he was getting rid of his rifle, this big gun. He threw it toward me, and I knew it was coming because it was in the script, and I caught it, but he threw it really, really hard. I think he was testing me, and I think I survived. I survived, but he was.
You did more than.
Well, I'm sure for him, he wanted to make sure that his kid was up to snuff.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah,
I think you're right.
One cool thing about you that people may not realize, and I thought this was really interesting, was that when you were about, I think, 10 years old, you inadvertently changed the way movie theme songs sounded on your dad's film, The Blackboard Jungle from 1955. Want to tell us about this story a little bit?
I love this
This is a
story
great
so
story.
much.
My dad was doing this film. Actually, he finished his work at Columbia, and now he's gone over to MGM. And they had him come over. He did his first film at MGM was a thing called Interrupted Melody with Eleanor Parker. And then they liked his work, and they decided to put him in this film called Blackboard Jungle, which was kind of a juvenile delinquent kind of film. So the director, Richard Brooks, lived near us where we were in the Beverly Hills house. And so Dick would stop by the house after work, and I didn't have a lot of friends, and I had a tremendous music collection as a kid. I would go down to the Beverly Hills gramophone shop, or we'd go up into Hollywood to Wallach's Music City, and sometimes Dolphins of Hollywood used to be a place out, in South Central area. I was indulged because my parents were wealthy and they felt kind of sorry for me. I got an allowance and I was able to buy lots and lots of records. So I happened to have this record, or I had a number of records. And so Richard Brooks said, Glenn, your son has all kinds of these rock and roll records. What do you think? And we played a bunch of them, and he took them to the studio, and they elected to use Rock Around the Clock by Bill Haley and the Comets and Blackboard Jungle. And it became the anthem of every teenager, in the world at that time, all across the world. Yeah, it was really something.
Yeah, I think Bill Haley owes you a little something.
I know, right? A little
Right.
Residual.
Yeah.
Peter, can you talk about some misconceptions that people may or may not have about your mom and dad that you'd like to correct? Clearly, it's in your book, but is there anything that you keep hearing that you think, no, that wasn't them?
The book tells the story really of the two of them. I mean, it's not my mom's story necessarily, but it's the story of our family. My mom was wonderfully talented. And frankly, she came from great poverty. It's really kind of interesting story. I mean, my grandmother, her mother was a chambermaid working, cleaning up rooms in hotels in Atlantic City. And my mother would go out on the beach and do calisthenics and stuff like that. And that's how she was discovered. But they came from a tremendously poor background. So to come from that, from your mother being a chambermaid to being the toast of Hollywood, it's quite a story.
It is.
Yeah.
It is indeed.
I'm just curious, did her upbringing, did it make her more thrifty or more frugal, or was she the opposite? Like, I have it, I deserve it, I'm going to spend it.
No, she loved dancing, and she was just driven to dance. I guess I can say this. My mother was a virgin when she married my father.
Oh, wow.
In 1943. She never had any relationships with any men. I mean, she had fans, people in the studios. She did tell me, and in fact, I talked to Jimmy Stewart about this. There was some little spark between those two, and with Robert Taylor, by the way.
Oh, wow.
But nothing consummated, but there was an attraction. I guess the one person, this is kind of interesting, the one person who really was pursuing mother this is kind of out of the blue, but it's Al Jolson.
Really?
Yeah, he was in hot pursuit of my mother.
Oh,
And
she was a beautiful
I don't
woman.
know.
she was a beautiful woman.
Yeah, interesting.
Peter, you mentioned the thousands of photographs of your family. Are there other mementos from the time of your parents that you hold particularly dear?
I guess the diaries, their personal notes in the diaries. I would think that we were as a family in probably over 2,000 moving magazines.
Yeah.
And I have an office here in the house, and I have rows and rows and rows of these magazines. I said to my wife, I said, when I croak, what's going to happen to all this stuff? I mean, who's going to want to go through, 1954, modern screen? So what we did is, at great expense, we've been copying the covers because they're so pretty.
Yes,
And then
yes.
I can just either, if I have an extra copy, I'll take the article just about our family out. So we've gone from probably 50 feet of magazines in a row to 8 nice D-ring binders. And so everything's in those. And it's much more accessible, I'm hoping one day the kids will kind of embrace their heritage.
Well, that's a good question. What about your kids? Did any of them follow in the family business, or are they interested in entertainment or show business?
No, not at all. No, our daughter lives up here near us in Kalispell, Montana, and she works at the Salvation Army as a salesperson.
Yeah.
And our other son is an economist. He works for the IRS. And our other son is he's the office manager of a hedge fund fellow.
I would say, speaking for both Steve and I, they were very smart.
They're smart.
Yes.
That's right.
Absolutely.
It's as you said, it's up and down, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah.
They're aware of their heritage. I mean,
Yeah.
they know who their grandparents were.
Oh, good. Now, Peter, I'm just curious about these diaries, which I can only imagine like the treasure trove of info in those diaries. Do you ever intend to make these public or give them to a library or like the academy or anything at any point, or are they just going to stay private for the family?
Yeah, I think you know what, Steve. My mother's are clean and beautiful, and she talks about Billy Rose. She talks about Broadway. She talks about people, people you wouldn't even know about. Well, you might, Stephen, but the average person's not going to know who Ted Richmond is or any of these people from early Broadway.
Yeah.
But my dad's there's some pretty interesting graphic stuff in there. So I don't know if those should go anywhere.
I understand.
Yeah.
So he didn't clean up his his thoughts.
No, he didn't.
How do you feel about the legacy of your mom and your dad today? Is it where you think it should be, or do you think, especially with your mom, should she be more revered? Because I think she was maybe the most talented dancer, male or female, ever. How do you feel about their legacy?
I would agree. I wish my mom's legacy were more embraced by people. I wish they knew more about her.
Mm-hmm.
My dad is he's every time I turn on Turner Classic Movies, he's on there. I just wish we got a residual out of that.
Right.
But, we get nothing, So
Yeah.
I think my dad I think he's well respected. He still has a lot of fans around the world.
Oh, yeah.
And,
Yeah.
my mom, I wish she, I must say, though, they had a Summer of the Stars thing, a tribute to her last year.
Yeah, at TCM.
They
Yeah,
showed
I
all of
saw
them.
that. Yeah.
Very nice. Yeah.
Peter, just as a final question for you, what are the films that you would recommend that maybe people don't know about or haven't seen as often as something like a Gilda for your mom and dad that you would encourage our listeners to check out?
Well, I think the one I mentioned earlier about So Ends Our Night that he did with Margaret Sullivan and Freddie March back in '43, I think it was. That's a very interesting film. Of course, I have my favorites. Like everybody knows about it, but the 3:10 to Yuma that he did with Van Heflin.
He should have been Oscar nominated for that role.
Yeah. Oh no, I know. And then he did The Big Heat.
Love The Big Heat.
Another one he should have been Oscar nominated for.
Yeah, that was great. That's really a great noir. And that's how I met Fritz Lang, or he met me. So, we had a bar at the house on Cove Way, and my dad was there, and Fritz liked martinis, and so my father, I'm sure he didn't. I'm not saying he was forcing me to have a drink, but he said, "Here, son, try this." So
Take a
Fritz
sip.
Lang made this was a vodka martini, and I sipped it. I didn't like it. Kind of a cute story, though.
Not many people can say that.
Yeah.
Yes, that's true. But
Well,
it's been an interesting run.
Peter, it has been such an interesting afternoon getting to chat with you. I just
So fun.
want to mention the biography of your father is entitled Glenn Ford, A Life. It's available on Amazon, and you can learn more about Peter and his family on Peter's website, peterford.com. But before we say goodbye, we need to remind our listeners of this week's Hollywood Pop Quiz.
And of course, the question was, who were Peter's godparents? And I'm going to let Peter answer the question.
Bill Robinson, Bojangles, was my godfather. And actually, Ethel Waters and Pearl Bailey both were kind of my godmothers. So I got to work with Ethel on stage at the Pasadena Playhouse in a play, and that was really kind of fun.
Those are the kind of godparents you want.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's amazing.
Absolutely. Yep.
Well, Peter, thank you so much for joining us. And listeners, thank you for joining us. We would love it if you would give us a 5-star review wherever you listen to this podcast. You can also watch the podcast on YouTube. And if you do that, give us a thumbs up and subscribe. Our handle on social media is @FromBeneathTheHollywoodSign, and you can find us on Instagram and on Facebook.
And we'd love to hear from you, so you can email us at info@FromBeneathTheHollywoodSign.com.
Thank you, Peter Ford. That's this week's View.
From Beneath the Hollywood Sign.
You've been listening to From Beneath the Hollywood Sign with Steve Cubine and Ann McNamara, the podcast that celebrates amazing stories of Tinseltown from its golden era. Join us next week for another episode and learn something else about Hollywood you probably never knew. Take a moment and give us a 5-star rating and a positive review, and tell your friends about us too. It'll help grow the podcast. Visit Steve's website at FromBeneathTheHollywoodSign.com. The executive producers are Steve Cubine and Nan McNamara. Executive producer and post-production supervisor, Lindsay Schnebley. Associate producer and researcher, John Price Ritchie. This podcast is part of the Airwave Media Podcast Network. Visit airwavemedia.com to listen and subscribe to their other fine shows like The Box of Oddities and The Shallow End with Schnebley and Toth. Copyright 2025. All rights reserved. That's a wrap.